Thank you, Mary Margaret. And thank you. Hello. Like so many of you watching this and taking part today, I too am a bereaved mom. But you see, I got to share in our daughter's life, not for 24 minutes or hours or months or weeks, but for 24 years. And I count as a blessing every moment that we had with her. As I wrote in my story, Morning Has Broken, Love, Loss, and Reclaiming Joy, my younger sister Leslie delivered a stillborn child, a daughter. And at that time, as I knew what she was going through and what was lying ahead for her, I thought that was the saddest thing that I had ever heard of. It certainly was in our family. So I do know the kind of families that baby's breath, that you are here to help. I've always said that the strongest thing that a person can do in grief, and I'll be saying this in the speech coming up, is to put out their hand and ask for help. But today you are there. We're here together virtually so that you can offer your support by grabbing that hand, holding it, and comforting someone who is in grief. And yeah, to offer hope that yes, you can survive the most unimaginable loss that comes with stillbirth, SIDS, SUDI, SUDC, and SUID. These are a lot of letters, but it really comes down to one today: you. Because you are here. You're why we're raising money today and why 30 families across Canada are supported by Baby's Breath Canada. From the bottom of my heart, I do thank you for your empathy, your compassion, and for making the season that is so dark for so many just a little bit brighter. Now, thank you for watching what is coming up. It's a talk that I gave just over a year ago, when things were kind of normal, about reclaiming joy. Little did I know that in the year ahead, little did any of us know, we'd be mourning something. Almost all of us, not only deaths, but the simple things, plans, dreams, family get-togethers, all of the things that make life worthwhile. But the message still holds, and I thank you for watching it here today. Now, I don't know who would be brave enough to follow a talk like that, but I guess I'm the only person who'd fit the bill, so here we go. I don't know if you all believe in signs or not, but I was just sitting backstage, walked down the stairs to clear my throat, and I found a feather. So I'd like to think that either that's from my daughter or that Cher's been in town. Because we did turn back time. Anyway, hi. This is a first for me at Excellence Canada. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm Erin Davis, and this is my TED Talk. Okay, not really my TED Talk, but you can dream, right? You have to have a vision. This is, well, look at my initials. Let's drop the T, Erin Davis, right there. You see? You see? Oh no, that's erectile dysfunction. Shoot. I promise to be more uplifting. Okay. All right. So I am here this morning to share with you our story, but more than that, I'm here to tell you about the stories that I have heard from people who not only took part in the writing of my book and the stories that they had to share, but from the people that I heard from afterward, the messages that have resonated most loudly in the wake of this book's publication last February. And as was mentioned in my introduction, and I can't say it too often because it's going to end at the end of this year. It is still number 10 on the Globe and Mail's nonfiction Canadian list. No, nonfiction period, number 3 Canadian. So I'm still very proud of that. But once that list is over, it's okay because it was in the October Reader's Digest, which means for the rest of your lives, every time you go to the doctor, you're going to be able to see our article. So there you go. And don't forget to use hand sanitizer. Okay. Now, when you heard, perhaps, that I was going to be speaking here today, you might have wondered why somebody whose journey is all about grief and loss and recovery might want to talk to a bunch of business leaders and people of excellence as you are today. But here's the thing. Whether you've lost a child or a spouse or a friend or a pet or a job, loss is loss is loss. And if you're like many of the people who have had one of those events, you'll recognize that day as a giant fault line in your life, where before it happened, your life was this, and after it happened, your life was that. That's how we think of May 2015, everything before Lauren died and everything after. This was when she was born. Lauren grew up before listeners' ears. We announced that we were pregnant with her, well, I was, from the window of the bay at Yonge and Queen on a frigid November morning, not unlike this. And then she joined our lives in March of 1991. Of course, people knew about her because we'd have her on our Christmas Eve show, and eventually on Take Our Kids to Work Day, too. She joined us in the studio. She was a natural, and it pained her father and me because he was a producer, and I, of course, am what I am. And she was going to go into radio, so she did. She went through college. Actually, just after the first year, she was snatched up by Ottawa's news talk leader, 580 CFRA, and she was already at the age of 24, hosting the midday news package all on her own. So she was doing an amazing job in the career that she had chosen, that she was pretty much destined for. And the picture that you're seeing is Lauren on her final broadcast before going on maternity leave. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy named Colin in October of 2014, and everything was perfect. What could possibly go wrong? This picture is from our first and last Christmas together. Lauren just loved Colin. She and her husband were very, very happy, and especially the following May 2015, when she celebrated her very first Mother's Day. But it was in the hours after that Mother's Day that Lauren's heart stopped in her sleep. She died in her sleep just hours after marking her first Mother's Day, and her last, and my last. We don't know what caused it. And I don't know if there's such a thing as closure anyway. I think those are the rolling credits at the end of Law and Order. But we believe, and the coroner in Ottawa, who was marvelous, tried so hard to determine what it was that took her life. He believed that her heart had stopped because of a drug that she was taking to help her to breastfeed. It's banned in the United States. It is prescribed with caution in the UK. But in Canada, it is handed out at breastfeeding clinics like cheese samples at Costco on a Sunday. It's known as domperidone or Motilium, and all we are asking is that breastfeeding mothers get their hearts checked to make sure that they don't have a possible heart defect or some slow heart rate that might stop if this drug got in there and ends their life. So, how did we find out about it? Well, it's funny I'm telling you this story here at the Carlo, because this is where I did my very first morning show with Mike Cooper when we were united in 2005. And it was with Mike Cooper on a breakfast morning show in Jamaica, where we were about to start our show, because you see, we used to take listeners away, listener trips once or twice a year, and we'd go to a ballroom at 5 o'clock in the morning. God bless these people. They'd won a free trip, and yet they would get up in the morning to watch our show, our radio show. So anyway, everybody's sitting there. It's 10 to 6. We were starting the show a little late that week because of being out of the country. And Rob was asked to go to the phone in the lobby. And I thought, well, 10 minutes had gone by and he hadn't come back. And I thought, where's Rob? So I got up from the table, high-fived everybody with our coffee mugs on the way out of the room, just like this room, and went to the lobby, and it was dark, and you could hear the tree frogs. It was one of those beautiful Caribbean mornings where there's humidity and the floor is just a little bit slippery. And I saw him sitting in a bench across from the front desk, and his shoulders were slumped. And I said, "What is it?" I guessed a couple of people who might have had a tragedy. And he said, "No, it's Lauren. She died in her sleep." I don't remember much about what I said or did at that time. Rob tells me that I collapsed next to him and shouted no, but then of course heard the echo in the room as everybody else in the resort was sleeping, and decided to bring it down, be in control, be on my best, which was a motto that we lived by. So then we collected ourselves and I walked back into the ballroom. I told our producer, well, Lauren's dead. He swore at me because he thought I was kidding. I told Mike Cooper. He said what we got the rest of the day, which was, what? And then I sat down and got ready to do the show, which sounds insane, I know. But when radio has been the one thing that you can hold on to in your world, the thing that makes sense, and where the world was normal 10 minutes earlier, you go back to it. Saner heads prevailed, and they decided that the show would go on from Toronto. Somebody else would do it. We went back to our hotel room and prepared to fly home that day and to prepare funerals. There would be one in Ottawa where she lived and had her family and had her job, and then one in Toronto. In the meantime, we got on that flight, WestJet. They were so amazing to us. There is some excellence right there. So kind to Rob and to me and to our little party of devastated people. While that was happening, it was hitting the news because, yes, I was a Toronto radio personality, but Lauren was a personality in Ottawa, right? So word got out, and her radio station had it first. And of course, while we were in the hotel room waiting for our flight, we had to get in touch with everybody before they read it on Facebook, right? One aunt and uncle in BC found out about it on Facebook. We got tweets in honor of Lauren. The then Liberal leader, Justin Trudeau, and NDP leader, Tom Mulcair, both sent their best greetings. And while we were in the air and in the days to come, people that I had crossed paths with over the years also tweeted very kindly to us. It helped to heal us, the messages that we got from strangers, from listeners, from people who had been like our family every single morning, were reaching out, wrapping their arms around Rob and around me and helping to heal. Healing so that in 1 month, on June 11th, I felt like I could go back. And I did. I went back on the air June 11th, 1 month to the day since Lauren's passing. I got criticized for it because everybody judges everything. And there were people who said, how can you possibly go back to work and, you know, be laughing or starting to sound happier every day when there are some people who suffer loss and never get off the floor? And I said, this is what I need to do to heal. I don't know if you do any yoga, if anyone does yoga here, but sometimes they tell you if you put a little smile on, it can fool your body into thinking, I'm enjoying this. So in the studio, actually laughing with these people who were my close pod, my friends, my heart, it helped me to heal because we had to find things to be happy about. It wasn't about me. It was the people waking up, brushing their teeth, getting ready to go to maybe a job they don't love or waking up to someone they can't stand. So that was my job, was to help them have a better day, right? It wasn't about me. And through that, I began to heal. It didn't feel so much like I was a scuba diver at the bottom of the ocean with no oxygen or air in my tank. Every day it got a little bit easier, to the point where people started to turn to me to say, how are you doing this? How are you healing? And I am not an expert on healing or grief or anything. All I can do is tell you how I got through it. And people were witnessing that. And I'm glad I had the chance to do that. I didn't do it for much longer, though. I stayed on the air for another 18 months or so. And it was a very hard decision for me to leave CHFI, but there had been changes, and everybody was moving on with their lives. Everybody but us. My dear partner and friend, Mike Cooper, with whom I spent a few hours just last evening, he had left the show in the next February of 2016 to be with his terminally ill wife, Debbie. So I got a new dance partner. So the station had changed. Our son-in-law, Phil, had found a woman who was also in grief over the death of her dad, and she and Phil came together, and she had a first-year ECE, so she was great with baby Colin. So Phil had moved on. Colin had moved on, everybody but us. So we decided to leave the city and the job I loved most of the time, and to head west. We moved to Victoria, BC. Actually, it's closer to Sydney. We overlook the airport in Victoria, and it's really quite magical. And before I left, speaking of magic, there was a goodbye breakfast. Not here, but at Casa Loma. So lovely, so magical, a castle, a gown, an awful, awful fairy tale. But something happened later that day that kind of made me believe, like that feather in a fairy godmother or Lauren watching over us, because on the day of my final broadcast in December 2016, I appeared on the Tracy Moore Show on City Line. And we had a talk about my career and why I was leaving, and she wished us well. We were all part of the same Rogers family, right? So in the audience that day
was a woman who was out with her sisters. And once a month, she goes out with her sisters. They go to a spa, they go to a play, they sometimes would go to a show like Cityline, and there she was. And her name is Iris Tupholme, and she just happened to be the senior vice president and executive publisher of HarperCollins. And a few days later, she emailed me and said, "I think you've got a book in you." And I said, "I think I do too." So that was how the next chapter, quite literally, in our life was going to be written. And it's not like it just kind of came out of the blue. I'd been writing for years and years. If you subscribe to the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of whatever to get good at something, I had been writing since 2003 a daily blog at erindavis.com. I have since cut it back to twice a week. I had to. I'd been writing, and if you don't believe me, take a look at my keyboard, because this is my second keyboard. I had literally worn the letters off, but it's funny, if you look at the letters, it spells hearts. What the heck is that? I never wrote about hearts and hearts and hearts, but there it is. So anyway, that's what I wrote on. And people ask me, the year that I took to write the book, our first year of rewirement, as Rob and I call it, away from the radio, away from our friends and everybody we knew, was it cathartic? Well, I wish it was cathartic. It was so painful, going back to every day and every moment that I had so mercifully forgotten about or hadn't taken in to begin with. But what it was, if you subscribe to the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief, which are actually for the people who are dying, not for those of us who are left behind, but it works. It was our acceptance. It was my acceptance. It was me saying, all right, this happened. Now what are we going to do about it? And that is a theme that is so prevalent in this little book. Has anybody read this book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl? Oh my gosh, what a little tiny treasure trove of wisdom and experience and so much heart this book is. And I read it after I wrote my book, thank God, because I was so afraid of plagiarizing anybody good. And he is good. This was amazing. One of the things that jumped out at me from the story of this psychiatrist who was taken away to the concentration camps in World War II, his wife, his pregnant wife, 24, same. She was sent to another camp, and he always hoped that she was alive, but she was not. One of the things that I took from this book was a line that he says, abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation equals normal behavior. Think about that. You're thrown something completely bizarre, you act a little strangely and to cope with it, but it's normal. And I'm so grateful for that, because what is normal? Who gets to decide what is normal besides everybody on the internet? Sitting down to do a show moments after hearing that our only child had died. Is that normal? Oh, hell no. No, it's definitely not. Standing up here and talking with you this morning and not dissolving into tears about our story. Is that normal? No, it is not. But we are all different. We're all different. And all grief is different. All of the stories that I compiled in this book that I would love to share with you this morning, but we're trying to keep things on track, and as MC, I have to do that. I'm really being hard on myself today. They taught me so many things about grief. For example, there's no comparing grief. People will say to me, I know it's not like losing a child, but my father passed away through. Your grief is your grief, and I honor that, and I respect it. Grief doesn't have to be a family member. It can be a pet, a job, a spouse. As I mentioned, there's no blue ribbon for grief. And of course, the end of a career, too. I was canned very publicly in 2003 because the radio station decided they wanted to go after a different audience, a smaller one. So, it all worked out in the end. I came back. Grief is not one size fits all, but likely hits all. Yeah, those aren't today's stockings. That was last year. Healing is not linear. There's no timeline for healing. It's not like, well, honey, it's been a year. Shouldn't you be dating now? Or, Mom, why aren't you getting rid of Dad's clothes? It's been 3 years. There's no timeline. There's no GPS. There's no straight line through this. And you never get over it, by the way. You only get through it. That's the thing about grief. We all want to take a magic pill. There isn't one. The Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief, as I mentioned, are for patients. And this is a perfect example of how there's no GPS. You get yourself a list, you get the, okay, 1, 2, I can do this, right? No, because you're going back and forth, you're on this one and then this one, and sometimes you don't go to that one, or you're that for one day, and the rest is like for 3 months, okay? It's a roller coaster. Grief is a roller coaster. You're up, you're down, you're there for a second, and then you're back, and it hits you from out of nowhere. But what do you do when you're on a roller coaster? If you're having fun, right? You put your hands up. Okay. In this case, the roller coaster, you're not giving up. You're saying, help me. Vulnerability, putting out your hands and asking for help. Talk, getting therapy. Even if you don't have a paid friend, and trust me, I've spent more time on my back than, okay, I'll keep it clean, Michelangelo. Therapy is wonderful, and there used to be such a stigma, but there's certainly not anymore. And talk to family, because joy shared is multiplied, pain shared is divided. And if you're telling me your grief, it takes me out of mine, and I am looking to help you. Because when your heart is shattered like a snow globe that was perfect and hits the floor, that humid tile floor in a Jamaican hotel, into a million pieces, you can try and sweep them up and put them back together. But the truth is, it's left open for so much more compassion. I used to think I was a pretty compassionate, empathic person, and I'd like to think I was. But being through the ringer of grief and loss opens you up to people suffering so much more. And again, it takes you out of yours, and that's the gift of it. Also, meditation, taking time for stillness and thought, and changing the way you think about things. This is one of my favorite things. We did cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the lessons we learned was, you know, you're driving along, as we were a couple of weeks ago, going to Ottawa to see our grandson, Colin. Guy drives by like 130 kilometers an hour, and you call him a name. And my husband reminds me, thanks to our CBT, maybe he's on the way to the hospital to see his wife for the last time. And that is a really good reminder, just changing the way that you think. Now, of course, 10 kilometers down the road, a cop had pulled him over. So I said to Rob, ha ha, and he went, maybe the cop is going to escort him to the hospital. Shut up! Jeez. So I meditate. I use an app. It's called Calm, and I'm sure that there are 1.6 million out there, but I like about Calm that it tells you nighttime stories. Rob's a little hard of hearing, so I can lie there and listen to my stories, and he tells one of them. And let me tell you, going to sleep to the voice of Matthew McConaughey is all right, all right, all right. Anyway. Medication. Medicated. There is no shame in getting medication for whatever is ailing you. And we've said this before, and you've heard it 1 million times. If you were diabetic, you would take insulin. If you're suffering from depression or mental illness, why wouldn't you accept help? But don't self-medicate. And I wasn't going to talk about this, except that we were talking about vulnerability, and I was self-medicating. I was sober for 10 years, including through Lauren's death. But when we retired in December of 2016, I decided that I was going to go ahead and see if I had an off switch with my drinking. And guess what? I did not. So I spent 7 weeks in treatment, in recovery treatment this past summer. And if anybody thinks it's like a spa with bunny slippers and pillow fights, no. This was the hardest thing I have done besides surviving the loss of our daughter, and it was worth it. And as of today, I have 128 days sober. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, really. No, I don't, well, I'll take it. Thank you very much. There's also something called purposeful mourning. This is what I call taking what's the worst thing that can happen to you in your life and turning it into something positive. And you see this name, Dr. Izzeldin Abuelaish. This is a man, one of the stories in the book that just absolutely floored me. He was a doctor who treated Palestinian and Israeli patients alike. He lived in the West Bank, and 4 months after losing his wife to cancer, His 3 daughters and a niece died in an Israeli rocket attack. What did he do? He wrote, "I Shall Not Hate," and founded Daughters for Life, a foundation to provide education for girls no matter what their belief or their nationality. Isn't that incredible? Just incredible. You know, Viktor Frankl, whom I mentioned before, in his book talks about the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, and the ability to choose one's way. We don't get to choose what happens to us in life. We have choices. You can get out of a marriage, you can, whatever. We have a lot of choices. Not all of them are good ones, but we can choose what to do in their aftermath. It took us a lot of time, a lot of talk, and a lot of soul searching. But after that day, in which the great fault line that I talked about divided our world before Lauren's death and after Lauren's death, we made a choice, and we chose gratitude. We chose hope and waking up each morning looking forward instead of looking back. There's a reason the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. And that's our little Molly on Groundhog Day. Eat your hearts out. That's Victoria on Groundhog Day, and we had the top down. Okay. I know. I like February in Victoria. It's that one month of the year where people hate one other city besides Toronto. So it's just the rest of Canada, right? I do not Instagram flower pictures. We chose love. We chose to embrace Phil's new wife. And she's also become a mom 5 weeks ago to Colin's little sister, Jane. This is Colin right after Lauren died. We chose to embrace Brooke because grief, someone wiser than I said, is just love with no place to go. So I told her, there's an opening, and we love you. We don't choose to lose a child or a spouse or a job or a pet, but if they're gone, how we react is the choice. What are you going to do? Remember that part about talking to somebody who understands? I'll tell you briefly about my former partner and dear friend, Mike Cooper. Debbie died, his wife died, after living with stage 4 colon cancer for 4 years. She was incredible. And a few weeks ago when we were at his place up near Peterborough, Mike said to Rob, "Am I ever going to feel normal again?" And Rob said, "You know what? There will be a night you'll go to bed and you'll go, I didn't cry today. And you'll feel a different kind of normal. You'll have a day without tears and you'll laugh," and he laughs a lot. It is a different normal. And then he said, there's this woman, this Anne Lamott, that Erin's always quoting. I love her. She's in recovery. She's about 70. She's all out of F's, and she writes, and she's great. You should follow her on Twitter, Anne Lamott. She said, "You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is you will never get over it. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up, and you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with the limp." We chose to go on to remember Lauren with a bench in Sydney near our home, where we can sit and look over a pond that looks like something out of Monet. It's absolutely beautiful, and she's with us. This is what Viktor Frankl calls the will to meaning, finding meaning in this and meaning in your life as you go forward. Writing and talking about Lauren and Mourning Has Broken has given us the will to meaning, and most importantly, reclaiming joy has been a labor of love for our daughter and for her son and for everyone who grieves. And it all comes down to this. After suffering what happened to us, which split our world wide open that day, we have reminded ourselves that after love, after change, and after loss, we can reclaim joy and dance just a little better, even with a limp, every day. And we are oh so grateful, as I am to you now. Thank you. Thank you.